Yeah, it's still over there.
Exactly.
Yes.
My logic.
No, okay.
Yes, it's just different. Just check. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I was expecting to win. The bridge was like, the bridge was, it looked like it was slow. And now it's a. Yeah, it's still.
All ready? All right. If everybody is ready.
I will call to order this meeting tonight, and it is the joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for this Tuesday, March 14th. And with that, could we please have a roll call?
Councilmember Rivers,
Here.
Councilmember Lemus,
Here.
Councilmember Ford,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sparks,
Here.
Mayor Harvey.
Here. Thank you for that. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Then we will be moving on to approval of the minutes and notice of waiving of reading of all the resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda. And we have this evening 3 items. We have the Cotati City Council special meeting of February 24th, the Cotati City Council regular meeting of February 28th, and the Cotati City Council special joint meeting with the Planning Commission on March 6th. So are there any questions or comments about the minutes? Seeing none, then I will open this up for public comment. Anyone wanting to make public comment on the minutes for the 3 meetings, you can please step up to the podium. I am seeing no one raising their hands nor rushing up here to speak about the minutes. Then we will open up public comment on the minutes to our Zoom audience. Carla?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, then I will bring it back to the council and would be looking for a motion.
Move to approve all 3 sets.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I didn't hear any abstentions? No, then all 3 sets of minutes passed unanimously. So with that, I will move on to announcements. First is meeting orientation for new attendees and viewers in conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules. The meeting agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizen's business item, which is the designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the City Council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements the City Council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposely biased. Next, Measure S supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, the maintenance of our streets, parks, and public buildings. See details on the web at cotaticity.org. Next, citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up with Nixle by downloading the Everbridge app from the iOS or Android App Store, or by texting your zip code 94931 to 888-777. Next, the city has vacancies on the Planning Commission and the Sonoma County Library Commission. See details on how to apply under the latest news at cotadicity.org. Next, like always, we would love to hear from you, so please feel free to contact the city at 707-792-4600 or info@cotadicity.org. If you have a non-emergency issue after normal business hours, you can contact us at 707-792-4611. And of course, if you have an emergency, please contact 911. Continue to look for updates on the city's website and social media channels available on Facebook, Instagram, Nixle, and Nextdoor. So with that, we will be moving on to the next items. First, we have a proclamation for National Surveyors Week. Do we have someone? Oh, if you'd like to come up, I will read. Welcome.
Thank you.
Proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati National Surveyors Week. Whereas surveying has been an essential element in the development of human environment since the beginning of recorded history, and it is a requirement in the planning and execution of nearly every form of construction, with its most familiar modern uses in the fields of transport, building and construction, communications, mapping, and the definition of legal boundaries for land ownership. And whereas in order to accomplish their objectives, surveyors use elements of engineering, physics, mathematics, astronomy, law, and history. And whereas since the colonial days of the United States, surveyors have been leaders in the community, statesmen, influential citizens, and shapers of cultural standards. Former notable surveyors include George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Lewis and Clark, Daniel Boone, and Henry David Thoreau, among many others. And whereas many services are now provided through the use of sophisticated surveying equipment and techniques, including satellite-borne remote sensing devices and automated positioning, measuring, recording, and plotting equipment. And whereas the establishment of the week of March 19th through 25th, 2023 as National Surveyors Week is a fitting tribute to all surveyors. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this 14th day of March, 2023, that the City Council of the City of Cotati proclaims the week of March 19th through March 25th, 2023 as National Surveyors Week in the City of Cotati. So, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Bruce Johnson. I'm a licensed land surveyor here in Sonoma County. And on behalf of the National Society for Professional Surveyors, the California Land Surveyors Association, and the Sonoma chapter of the California Land Surveyors Association, I would like to thank you for this recognition of our important work. After all, without us, you might have a sewer line running right through the middle of your house. Nobody wants that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody wish to make any comments? No? Okay, well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Did you want a picture?
Sure. At least
Come on down.
it'll be photographic proof I was here.
We have our own personal stuff.
Covering your face, yeah. All right. Here we go, smile. Great. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for all of our.
I thought I would be quick one.
Thank you. All right, and now we have another proclamation, and I believe we have someone from the Red Cross here to accept that. Okay, if you would like to come up. So proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati for American Red Cross Month in 2023. Whereas during American Red Cross Month in March, we celebrate humanitarian, I can't even speak tonight, humanitarian spirit of Cotati and reaffirm our commitment to help ensure no one faces a crisis alone. And whereas caring for one another is at the heart of our community and exemplified by the people of the City of Cotati, whose simple acts of kindness through the Red Cross provide help and hope in people's most difficult moments, thereby continuing the life-saving legacy of Clara Barton, who founded the organization more than 140 years ago to prevent and alleviate human suffering. And whereas every day these ordinary individuals lend a helping hand to make an extraordinary difference for our neighbors in need, whether it's providing emergency shelter, food, and comfort for families displaced by home fires and other disasters, donating life-saving blood for cancer patients, accident victims, and people with sickle cell disease and other life-threatening conditions, supporting military members and veterans along with their families and caregivers, using and teaching vital skills like first aid and CPR to help others survive medical emergencies, or delivering international humanitarian aid and reconnecting loved ones separated by crisis around the world. And whereas their support, volunteerism, and generous donations are critical to our community's resilience, we hereby recognize this month of March in honor of all those who fulfill Clara Barton's noble words: you must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it, and ask everyone to join in this commitment. Now therefore be it proclaimed on this 14th day of March 2023 by the City Council of the City of Cotati that March 2023 is proclaimed as Red Cross Month in the City of Cotati. We encourage all citizens of Cotati to reach out and support the humanitarian mission of the Red Cross.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you like to say anything?
I do. I have a few
Okay.
things to say.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council and community. My name is Kelly Bradshaw. I am a volunteer with the American Red Cross based out of the Santa Rosa office. I started with the Red Cross at the time of the fires in 2017. As disasters are never planned events, I am happy to be here tonight in place of my Red Cross colleague. Her name is Deborah Smith, but she has been deployed to Sacramento to work with the government partners to coordinate relief efforts in response to the current atmospheric rivers and resultant flooding and disasters in Northern California. On behalf of the American Red Cross, I thank the City of Cotati for this month's proclamation that March is Red Cross Month. It is my honor to accept this proclamation and express our gratitude for the partnerships with and within the City of Cotati. Red Cross offers humanitarian aid guided by the values and principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, independence, volunteer service, unity, and universality. With a workforce made up of 90% volunteers, our goals fall into 5 lines of service, which you mentioned: disaster relief, blood services, training and certifications, service to the armed forces, and international services. There are 2 main goals. First, provide relief and support to those in crisis: shelter, food, health, mental and spiritual crisis support, and bulk distribution of items for basic need and comfort. Second, to help families and communities to prepare for emergencies. Right now in our local region, we are running or supporting 38 shelters with 593 guest clients due to area flooding. In the last 100 days, the area Red Cross volunteers have responded to over 80 local disasters, mostly being home or apartment fires, with aid for immediate needs and sheltering. With the start of daylight savings time, it is a good reminder time to test our smoke detectors. Review, review the 2-minute exit plan with your family, and check your emergency kits or go bags. Make sure things are up to date. At the local level, the Red Cross needs your help. Being 90% volunteers, we ask all to serve and prepare to strengthen our communities. Within the Red Cross, there are so many opportunities, and we need skills of all sorts in crisis and in calm. There is so much to be done. Often the question is posed, what can I do? There are jobs available to align with your available time and skill set, or to help you learn a new skill. Please allow me to share briefly some examples. Come help us install smoke alarms. So far this year, we have installed 582. Last year, we installed 1,380. It's a fun day. It instantly helps members of our community. Learn CPR, donate blood, or host a blood drive. Teach kids in schools about fire safety and exit planning with the Pillowcase Project. Become a shelter worker. Train now to help when an emergency shelter is opened. DAT team members or disaster action team members respond to home and apartment fires with emergency shelter and emergency needs. There are areas in transportation, driving emergency response vehicles, distribution of supplies, or the organization of vehicles. Who has which car? Where are they? Organize the contacts for rental vehicles during a disaster. Learn skills now to support disaster response efforts. Office reception organization at the chapter office, community outreach and preparation, trailer stocking, inventory, logistical planning, government liaisons. We invite all to join us, and mostly be prepared. Prepare yourself, prepare your family, and get involved. For more information, please go to redcross.org. Thank you to the City of Cotati for this proclamation, for helping us to get the word out about the mission and the services of the local Red Cross. We appreciate the partnerships with and within the great city of Cotati. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any comments? No? All right. Would you like?
I would love one. Thank you.
Oh, you can do it at the same time. Get a picture of it. Smile. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next we will be moving on to the approval of the final agenda. Do we have any changes?
Yeah,
to
thank you,
the
Mayor.
agenda?
No proposed changes tonight.
Since this is an action item, I will open this up for public comment. Anybody wishing to speak on the approval of the final agenda, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing anybody up. And it appears that we have a hand on Zoom, so can we take that?
See, Lori, you have the floor.
Hi, I just got on to tell you guys that there's no webcast going on. It hasn't been going for 20 minutes, so I'm on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay. And we are okay to move forward?
Yes, we are. The Zoom is available and the public is certainly welcome to be here in person.
Thank you for that. So with that, there are no changes to the final agenda. So we will move forward to citizens' business and public comment for the consent calendar items. Where is my little blurb? Okay. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2021-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time where disability accommodation has been requested. So with that, I will go to Zoom first this time.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone in the public here that would like to speak on the consent calendar or citizens' business? I'm not seeing anybody run towards the podium, so then we will close public comment on the consent calendar and citizens' business. So we have on the consent calendar tonight, we have 3 items. First one is approval of the 2023 La Bonita Chica Bonito Children and Family Festival in La Plaza Park on April 30th, 2023. Second item is approval of the 2023 Yard Markets events in La Plaza Park. And lastly, dash camera agreement for police electric vehicles. So is anyone wanting to? Yes.
I'd like to pull item C, the dash camera agreement.
Okay. And anybody want to pull either of the other two? Okay, then I would be looking for a motion on items A and B, the consent calendar.
I move that we approve items A and B on the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, so A and B passes unanimously. And then item C, can we have a staff report then, or do you need a staff report, or do you have a specific question?
I have a specific
Okay.
question. My question is related to the automatic license plate reader portion of the quote that we received. And I do have a question that we weren't able to get resolved in time for the meeting about, I thought that we were paying for the ALPR system with grant funding. And I had it in my mind that at the time when we would be at a decision point to take over paying for that with the general fund, that would be a good time to have a community conversation about the pros and cons of using the ALPR system. So within this agreement, it's all bundled, so it's hard to tell how much it's costing, but there is a software license fee for the ALPR system that we're going to be paying for somehow as part of this. And I want to bring I think that we ought to have a community discussion before we start paying to fund the ALPR system about the pros and cons. So I feel like I would like to see how is that bundled into this? Are we paying for it? How much are we paying for it before I feel comfortable proceeding with this contract?
So yeah, just before the meeting, I did try to reach out to the vendor to get some clarity on that, and I didn't hear back. I think everyone's gone for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very late question. I apologize.
Yeah, but it's so in the quote, it's part of the bundle. Axon is the vendor. We use Axon for body cams, and also for tasers. The other police equipment that we use Axon for. And since we've been using body cams, we pay for a hosted service called Evidence. Well, it's basically just a hosted service where everything gets uploaded to. It's a secure server. So for example, after the officers are done with their shift, they drop it into a cradle and it auto uploads to a secure site that can't be tampered with or edited or anything like that. And it also is a place to aggregate other information related to cases. You know, if it gets wrapped up and shipped off to like the DA, for example, that's sort of how that information gets transferred. So video files, pictures, that kind of thing. And so we already have body cams and tasers. And my understanding is that these dash cams use that same cloud service, same hosted service to upload. And that's, so I don't know specifically what the answer to the question is, if there's a specific cost, but We already pay for the service through the body cams, but I can't say for sure that there's not some element of cost in this quote for that. So that's maybe not, it's not the answer yet, but that's kind of where, how it works. And how the ALPR itself works is Department of Justice has a database of stolen cars, and they publish that to certain secure sites. And so evidence, the hosted site that Axon uses, has access to that DOJ stolen car database, and it just looks for plates that are stolen. That's basically what it does.
But isn't it correct that it also reads all the plates that are viewed by the police camera and by the car camera and uploads the location information of all the citizens who are driving those cars all the time?
So what it does is it tracks the police vehicle location, and it stores it for a short period of time. It stores a plate number, and then if a police officer or some other law enforcement official loads that plate number in as a stolen vehicle, it'll show up as like, hey, this is stolen, and this is where it was last read or last seen. So that's basically how it works. It doesn't like actually read plates. It stores the numbers, like the number letter combinations.
Isn't that what reading is?
Well, I just want to make, what I'm trying to say, and maybe not very eloquently, is I'm trying to make the distinction between running a plate and reading the plate, right? It doesn't run a plate, so it doesn't do anything with the number unless someone has it in the stolen car database. And then just to say this car was located somewhere. So that's what that is.
Okay, but it also it also keeps a database of these plates and their locations on file for quite like a year or 2 years, right?
It's a year, I believe.
In this giant database.
I believe it's a year.
Everyone's location that comes through Cotati and encounters a police car is being tracked and stored in this database. That's where my concern comes from.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Well, I guess my vote right now would be to delay this until we find out a little more. Either we, if we're already paying for the ALPR licenses through our dash cam or our body cam contract, are we double paying for it by signing? I'd just like to know a little more about that, and maybe bring this back. It looks like we're not supposed to start until January of 2024 anyway, so it doesn't seem super time sensitive.
Yeah, the getting the order in the queue is the time sensitive piece, I guess, because it's like an 8-month equipment order if we want to move forward with it.
okay, are you done with your questions? Any questions on this end?
Well, just a question about the status of the grant funding that paid for LPR. Is that all done now? Or are we still running the rest of it on a grant?
It's so, all right, so there's the countywide auto theft task force, which got this grant. And so every police department has access to a system called Vigilant, which is the, I'm trying to not get too confusing, but so Vigilant is another, it's like Axon, like it's another vendor. And so there's 2 or 3 of them that provide this Department of Justice interface for plates. And so that grant is still going right now. And so all the police departments in Sonoma County that are part of the auto theft task force have access to it. And I think it runs for another couple years before the grant runs out. So Axon is just another vendor, basically. And so
They're coordinated with our body cam, which
Yeah.
is why
right. And so
wanting to use that particular one, right?
And so we have a couple devices that are Vigilant devices. And if we move forward to this, we'll have these devices that are Axon devices. It's the same license plates. It's not like the back-end Department of Justice database is the same. It's just 2 different ways to get there, I guess. That's the way to say it.
Yes, okay.
But it sounds like we are paying. And so the grant is paying for vigilance and we are paying for Axon to do the same thing. Is that correct?
Well, the grant's paying for Vigilant and the Axon, that's the answer. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But we are paying already for the hosted service, which it was my original understanding that that was all part of it. We've already paid for it with the body cams that we use and the tasers, and that it would just be another device connected to that same service that would have that access portal. But I'm not positive. So that's what I asked the vendor to confirm.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, since this was pulled, then I will open this up for public comment. Anyone wanting to speak on the dash camera agreement for police vehicles? Please step forward. I'm not seeing anyone here. So anyone from our Zoom audience?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, so we have taken public comment, yes.
I am in agreement with Vice Mayor Sparks's concerns, and in order to get our order for the hardware in, it seems to me reasonable for us to approve the hardware order. We could even approve all aspects of the proposed contract with the exception of the ALPR licensed software and ask for that to come back when we have some clarity on both the need for it, given the vigilance system, and the terms of the contract, since it's all bundled in here. That would be my proposal, that we approve everything except that line and ask for that one to come back.
Yes,
Just a clarifying question, would that, the way to do that, would that be to sort of give the city manager authority to just ask for a new quote without that line, without that item?
I thought your suggestion was to move this forward without that line.
Well, the
And
trick.
The tricky part is the equipment, because if we don't get in line for the equipment, we have new vehicles that don't have this equipment. And I think backing up a little bit, as I understand it, right now, part of the problem is that the new cars can't attach the old equipment. And what you get with the body cam when things start is you're getting a picture of the dashboard. And so you're not really getting a full picture of the stop and what's happening, which is what the vehicle camera is trying to capture, is what happens when you stop. And, you know, that whole, before you kind of get there. That's my understanding. Did I say that correctly?
No, I'm curious if we can just, order the equipment without the software. Typically, software is something that can be loaded at a later time, or is that something we can do? So we can get in the queue, but wait to find more information specifically about the license plate reading part of it.
Yeah, so I'm not totally sure. I mean, I certainly can try to do that, just to order it and put a note on there. It's like not with ALPR at this point, and come back but I don't know. I'm not totally sure. Because the only quote I have has it bundled in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little reluctant to let us not have the full piece of the picture, because we, kind of right now, every stop with the new vehicle, we don't have that. And as has been pointed out, it's been real helpful in any dispute resolution to have that whole picture of what's, going down. I suppose, is it possible for us to drop that part if we determine that that's a part we don't want later? But get this kind of moving. I don't want to, because it could be months before we have a opportunity to have a public discussion on all the pros and cons. I mean, we're in budget season and so on and so forth. I just would hate to have those, and as was said in strategic planning, we have more of these vehicles coming. And I just feel like we're.
Well, would you, Mayor, I did get an email from the vendor just now,
Oh, okay.
but of course I need to do some math, try to figure it out. So maybe what we can do is postpone this item until the end of the agenda and then we can come back to it. Give me some
Oh.
time to do the math, because of course it's not totally
Okay.
clear, but
Okay.
you know.
And are we okay to do that?
Yes, we are. You can
Okay.
just postpone this item until after,
After
well,
the
before we
regular.
go into closed session.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Then is everyone okay with us moving this to the end while Damien does math? And we've got Ben here in case he needs some math. So for right now, then we will hang on this item. And we will move on to direction on future agenda items. Okay.
I'm
Yep.
just. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to bring it up next time.
Okay, all right. There's more meetings, lots more meetings. So, okay. So then we will move on to the regular agenda. And our first item is review of the proposed Sonoma Water Transmission System budget for fiscal year 2023-24. And Craig, are you
We'll
starting
start
that
here.
out? Okay, because I also see Lynn and friends in the audience.
Yes, I'll provide a brief introduction and then let them do the bulk of the presentation. So Mayor,
you for
members of the
that.
council, Craig Scott, Public Works Director, City Engineer. With me tonight is Jake Spalding and Lynn Rosselli, both finance managers with the Sonoma Water, to make a detailed presentation of the proposed 23-24 budget. This is an annual procedure. But first, let me back up with the the framework of this. The city purchases wholesale water from the Sonoma Water. It used to be called Sonoma Water County Water Agency. And the city is a contractor along with other cities and districts in this region. And we purchase the water, as does everybody else, through this restructured agreement. The Water Agency has formed a technical advisory committee, which is comprised of staff members of each of the contract agencies, and then also has a water advisory committee, which is comprised of elected officials from those contractors. Okay, so the TAC typically meets monthly, WAC every other month. Generally, at the March 6th meeting, the TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, made after having met, a group of them met for 3 times to discuss the budget. The TAC actually did make a recommendation to the WAC to support the draft budget, with the exception of Santa Rosa, the city of Santa Rosa, which voted against the proposed rate increase. And this is more an advisory vote, because even if we all said no, the agency would just go ahead and move forward with the budget. Back to the subcommittee that met. It's a subcommittee of the TAC, comprised of the city of Cotati, and it was led by the town of Windsor's representative at Valley of the Moon, North Marin Water District, Marin Municipal Water District, and then Rohnert Park. And so we did meet 3 times and had an opportunity to ask questions of Jake and Lynn of the budget, and went into quite some detail. We did, because of the significant increase this year. It's close to 10%. It's 9.42 for us. For the city, we did really scrutinize the water agency on what they could do to reduce the rates. They did get the budget down to by $3.5 million. And by using reserves and grant money is definitely factored into there as well, the grants that they have in hand. You'll hear more about that from them. We did question the ongoing practice, which makes sense conservatively for rates, because you don't want to be short of using the lowest of the 36 months or the last 12 months. And the last 12 months just really hit us hard this time because we had historically low, we had historically high water conservation levels. I mean, for the city of Cotati, our city responded amazingly with 25% reduction. But then it's a fully volumetric rate. So we've heard that 90% of this cost increase is due to the reduced volume being used, and about 10% is increased energy costs, labor, the other things that kind of go up with inflation. But they did go back and looked at certain things they could do differently. Before I hand this off, in the packet, the prior rates are listed on page 67 of the packet. So you'll see last year was 6%. The year before was about 3.5%. That's just a good frame of reference. And then bam, we get this 9.4%. So it's, we do have, I do want to speak just briefly too about, we are on year 1 of our 5-year rate program, and we've been assuming 6% rate increases for the water agency. So 10% is obviously outside of that. However, it's a 1-year instance. If this were to happen multiple years, that could be an issue. We looked on the expense side, and it is within our pro forma with the water use having been reduced, our increased use of wells. We are within the amount of money in our pro forma being assumed for the water agency. And then the other side of it, of course, is looking at the revenue side. And so we haven't, we're looking at exploring that in more detail. We have a upcoming strategic planning or budget workshop with the council on the enterprise funds. So we're going to come back and address that more specifically at that point. But at this point, it looks like it's an anomaly, and it's within the pro forma so far. I think with that, I'll introduce Jake Spalding, Finance Manager with the Water Agency, to make the presentation. Thanks, Jake. Oh, and here.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Jake Spalding. I am the Finance Manager at Sonoma Water. And as Craig just mentioned, I'm going to provide you with a quick overview of our fiscal year 23-24 budget for the water transmission system. So each year we do develop the budget. We develop it to meet our operations, our maintenance needs, regulatory requirements, as well as capital needs of the system. This year, similar to previous years, last year in particular, we do have a need for increased needs to improve our infrastructure and maintain some of the infrastructure that is getting quite old. And we need to do all this in order to operate the system reliably and 24/7 as is needed in the water system. Next slide, please. Real quick, the water transmission system has 3 main aqueducts, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Sonoma. On the map that you see on the slide, the Santa Rosa aqueduct's in purple, the Petaluma aqueduct is in blue, and that's the one you're most concerned with, and the Sonoma aqueduct is in green. So each one of the water contractors that's part of the restructured agreement is located primarily off one of these 3 main aqueducts, and they pay a rate that is specific to that aqueduct. Next slide, please. So as Craig mentioned, each year we do draft the budget. We take it to the TAC ad hoc budget subcommittee. in mid-January, and then we go through a transparent and collaborative process with all the water contractors, ultimately taking it to Sonoma County or Sonoma Waters Board in April. And the restructured agreement that was mentioned earlier does stipulate that our board approve these rates by the end of April. And I would just like to say thank you to all the subcommittee members, particularly Craig. So next slide, please. So our water transmission system is pretty complicated. It's comprised of multiple funds. You can see on the screen here, we have 4 main types of funds, and each one of them has their own separate budget and rate, and then they're all combined in order to create the aggregate rate. Next slide. So Sonoma Water, we have a relatively robust water transmission system. However, we are facing several challenges that are not unique to our agency. Most of our facilities are 45 to 65 years old at the moment. They've expended a lot of their useful life. In fact, 40% of our infrastructure right now only has 10 to 20% of its useful life remaining. You know, and not too different than you know, maintaining an older car. As it ages, maintenance needs increase. We do have ongoing preventative maintenance programs that help to reduce these, but in the past couple of years, we have seen increases both in corrective maintenance and emergency repairs that are a sign of the age of the system. And then in addition to the age of the system, you know, we are vulnerable to multiple natural hazards, primarily flood, fire, and earthquake, with earthquake being the biggest one in terms of causing, you know, significant damage to the system and service disruptions to the residents of our county. So I'm mentioning all this just to say that the budget that we are presenting today, you know, takes measures to address all these. They're obviously not solved in one year, and it's a multi-year effort, but they are all included in the budget. Next slide. So what's in the budget? Well, on the capital side, we have completed or will be completing several important hazard mitigation projects this fiscal year. And next fiscal year, we're proposing to continue that effort with an additional $6.3 million in hazard mitigation projects. A particular note to the Petaluma Aqueduct customers, both the Eli Booster Station and the Wilford Booster Station projects that are on this slide serve the Petaluma Aqueduct. We do make every effort to offset the costs of these high cost capital projects. We have been able to secure $10 million in FEMA funding for hazard mitigation projects in the past, and we are pursuing funding for the projects that you see on the screen here, which could help offset costs in the future. Next slide. In addition to the hazard mitigation projects, our capital program includes $5.9 million in other projects to increase our resiliency. The projects that you see on this screen do include $1.1 million in offsetting grant revenue in fiscal year 23-24. So when you add up the projects on this slide with the hazard mitigation projects on the previous slide, we are proposing a total capital budget of roughly $12.2 or $12.3 million for fiscal year 23-24. Next slide. The budget includes $40.4 million in operations and maintenance projects. We've highlighted a few of them on the slide that you see here. You know, these include multi-phase aqueduct cathodic protection programs, which help prevent corrosion of the aqueducts that deliver the water to your communities, as well as a 10-year, $88 million tank maintenance, recoating, and rehabilitation program, which also includes some security enhancements on the system. You know, the projects that you see here, these are our highest priority projects, and they're really integral to maintaining the system and supplying reliable water to the communities. Next slide. Some of the other funds that we have, what we call the sub-funds, include the biological opinion, water supply planning, and water conservation. This budget includes $9.78 million for these funds. Of note in these ones, you know, on the biological opinion side, the Dry Creek Habitat Enhancement projects, which you may have heard about, are completing phases 4, 5, and 6. We experience significant cost savings on these projects because the Army Corps does pick up 65% of the cost, which provides a savings to the water contractors. Also in this budget, we did include a $150,000 match contribution for the Potter Valley Project Russian River Water Forum grant that was just submitted to DWR. If this one is awarded, the County of Sonoma, County of Mendocino, and Sonoma Water's Russian River Projects Fund will also be kicking in match costs to fund this grant. And lastly, you know, we've all heard of our very successful water conservation and education program. that's been very successful in the past. This budget does also include $3.8 million in grant funding, also with DWR to further those efforts and implement additional programs. Next slide. So this slide compares the budget, the previous year's budget to the budget for fiscal year 23-24. As you can see, we're proposing a total budget of $68.3 million, which is offset by $18.15 million in grants, use of fund balance, and bond proceeds. You know, of note, when you look at this slide, you'll see, as Craig mentioned, that we have pared it down, and it's actually $3.5 million less than the previous year's budget. And this is largely due to some budget reduction measures that I'll talk about on another slide. The one line item you see here that is increasing, the operations and maintenance budget, it's going up roughly 4.4%, and that's really to address those additional infrastructure. And as you can see, all the other budgets are showing reductions. Next slide. So real quick, this slide is just to exemplify where the majority of our costs go. You know, operations and maintenance makes up roughly 60% of our expenditures. Capital projects come in at about 18%, followed by the sub funds, and finally debt service at less than 10%. Next slide. I might have to ask you to do a couple on this one because it's an animation. So I wanted to give you a real quick example of how our rates are calculated. This is just an example, but basically we take the cost of operations and maintenance and we divide that by the amount of water sold. And as Craig mentioned, you know, the restructured agreement stipulates that the amount of water sold for budgeting purposes is either the previous 12 months or the last 3 years annual average. Can you hit the button a couple times? So as you can see, and one more time, this year, the 12-month average is much less than the 3-year average. And so if we hit it 2 more times, you'll see that it goes into the equation, and actually 1 more time and 1 more time. And that gets us to roughly 1,173 acre feet. Now, once again, that's a simplified example, but the main purpose of this slide is to show you that it is a fully volumetric rate that's stipulated in the restructured agreement. And that means that all else being equal, when we have lower budgeted water deliveries, your rate is going to be higher and vice versa. You know, particular note, the 23-24 budget is actually 8.5% less in budgeted deliveries than the previous fiscal year's budget. We are not meeting that budget at the moment. We are having lower deliveries, and I'll talk about that on another slide. But because of that, as Craig mentioned, we do have, the calculation is roughly 90% of this increase is actually due just to the lower deliveries in the equation. Next slide, please. So, you know, we're not immune to the fact that rising rates are difficult for everyone. We have taken some significant efforts to try and reduce this rate, including, you know, reducing the budget by $3.5 million. The efforts that we did allow us to reduce our original estimate of over 20% down to 10.56. We did that by deferring projects, you know, roughly $2.4 million in projects, trimming budgets, prioritizing projects, reducing utility expenses, as majority of our expenses come from large hydro projects, which fortunately are starting to operate again, and so our rates are coming down. And then increasing the use of fund balance, bonds, and grants. In addition to that, water contractors do have a discretionary capital charge that they can adjust to help reduce the rate farther. Petaluma AQ customers did elect to do that this year, and I'll show that on the next slide. And then lastly, you know, as I mentioned before, deliveries this year are coming in significantly under budget. In fact, we're estimating a revenue shortfall of $4 to $6 million, which is requiring us to jump into and utilize some of our prudent reserve for the first time. This is something that the WAC members, the advisory committee, will need to address in a future budget when we have higher deliveries, and it won't be as difficult to refund that prudent reserve. Next slide. So here are the proposed rates for the 3 main aqueducts. As you can see, the Petaluma Aqueduct is in the middle there. The 3 aqueducts range from 9.42 to 10.56%, including the use of the grants, bond proceeds, and fund balance of $18.15 million. Had we not included that, you know, the rate would be even higher, close to 52% actually. So water contractors, as I mentioned, can reduce their discretionary charge. The Petaluma AQ customers did reduce it to 0 for this for fiscal year 23-24. And that brought your rate down to 9.42%. I would just say one more time, we are fully volumetric. It's stipulated in the restructured agreement. The 10% of this increase that is tied to additional projects really is these projects we've been putting off deferring for several years in an effort to keep the rate low. And that allowed us to keep the rate below 5%, both in the 5 and 10 year averages, the last 5 and 10 year averages. Unfortunately, we didn't have the room to do that anymore this year. And we do estimate, and this is a rough calculation, that this would increase the cost by about $2 to $3 per month for the average resident in Sonoma County. Next slide. So where does this take us in the long run? Well, projects in our long-range financial plan that affect the Petaluma AQ total roughly $317 million through the year 2030. The majority of these projects are hazard mitigation projects, resiliency projects, and maintenance projects. Next slide. And so what does that mean for rates? Well, in this very conservative model that we put up here, that does mean that we're showing 4 years of rate increases that are between 9.4 and 11.3%, which will then moderate to around 8% in later years. This is a very conservative forecast. There are lots of assumptions in here, including growth in demand, growth in deliveries, but it doesn't include any grant funding that we haven't already secured. Sonoma Water has been very successful at securing grant funds for hazard mitigation and other projects. And so we have every anticipation that we can further reduce these rates by securing more grants. Next slide. So this slide just compares our water rates to other water wholesalers in the area. As you can see, Sonoma Water is on the far left-hand side. We do have the lowest cost water compared to the others. Not all of our systems are exactly the same, so it's just one form of comparing ourselves. I would note all these water agencies are experiencing the same issues we are. Everyone's had historically low water deliveries the last couple of years with fixed costs, and so at the moment we're hearing that these other agencies are pursuing rate increases between 5.5 and 15%. For next fiscal year. And that's on top of the rates that you see in the slide here. Next slide. So the next steps for us right now, we are presenting to town councils. We will then go to the Water Advisory Committee for a vote on April 3rd. And finally, we'll go to Sonoma Water's board for adoption of the rates on April 18th. Excuse me, one more slide. In summary, Sonoma Water, we understand that this is a difficult rate increase to pass on to the constituents. We have taken all the measures we feel are prudent to take to pass a well-measured and budget that provides the funds to do all the things that we need to do. That includes reducing the budget by $3.5 million, prioritizing projects and deferring projects where possible, increasing the use of grants, bond proceeds, and fund balance. We were also able to further reduce the rate, on Petaluma AQ by lowering the discretionary capital charge, and the Army Corps picking up the 65% of the Dry Creek projects has really helped as well. So we're here hoping that we can get you to provide direction to your WAC to support the vote. If there are any questions, I'm here. Lynn Roselli, our Administrative Services Division Manager, is here, and Mike Thompson, our Assistant General Manager, can also help.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. So the first one, did I hear you say that you were projecting deliveries to increase as part of the budget?
I'm not sure I said exactly that. At the moment, we are not projecting delivery increases. In fact, the recent rains are kind of working against us because we've had historically low deliveries, and now we're having even lower water deliveries because everyone's reservoirs are full. So in the short to medium term, we are not forecasting increased deliveries.
Okay, so this is reminding me of when you lose weight, you get to eat less, right? Is when you conserve water, you pay more for it. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that correct?
It's a difficult message. it's a difficult message. It does seem that way. You know, another way to look at it is, had we not conserved as much as we had, we would be pursuing additional capital projects to increase the capacity of the system. And a lot of those projects are what you do see in the long range financial plan in farther years out. And we've been able to push those farther and farther out because of the conservation measures that our residents have taken. So there is short-term pain, but had we had to implement those capacity increasing projects, the rate increases would actually be significantly higher.
I'm sorry. And then the other thing, I think this was from you, Craig, is even if we say no, it happens anyway, correct? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Sylvia?
Yeah, I had a question. I saw some of the transmission rate increases through 2030 or 2040 that could increase. And meanwhile, we could continue conserving water and the rates could increase. And you mentioned grants as one way of kind of offsetting some of that. Is there any other strategies that the Sonoma Water is working on to kind of help bring that besides grants?
We can certainly, more bond financing can certainly spread costs out, grant funding. And then generally, just looking at how we time different projects and where they are on the timeline and on the schedule can all affect how the rates are. The projection that we showed that was extremely conservative, right? I mean, it's based on very low water deliveries. It's based on capacity projects not being further out on the timeline. It's based on no grant funding. So it's really like, a worst case scenario. But with grant funding, with inflation reducing over time, we certainly are expecting that we will be able to, moderate the rate increases over time.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I was just gonna say, it's important to note too, you were looking at those future years. And as I was saying a minute ago, we have been able to push those large capacity and increasing projects farther and farther out on the long range financial plan. If conservation measures continue, that would continue to happen as well.
Okay.
And the water conservation has really made a huge difference. And I mean, I know what it looks like, to the consumer, and it is, like Jake said, a very hard message, but water conservation has made a huge difference in keeping rates from being extraordinarily higher than they would be had people not conserved. And so and if they can continue to conserve, we have the hope that they will be able to keep their rates, the amount that they pay every month much lower, right, going forward. So it actually, can encourage additional conservation, water conservation going forward to, so that they pay less on their bill.
Laura?
Thank you. I'm new on the wax, so please bear with me. But my question is just, this isn't quite making sense to me, but during times of drought, deliveries decrease. But now you're saying during times when there's a lot of water, deliveries still decrease? That doesn't make sense.
Not necessarily. And
Okay.
weather is the biggest factor in where our deliveries are going to end up. We're in kind of a tough situation at the moment in that we have to look from a portfolio of all of our customers at their demands. We have customers that have their own surface reservoirs. The last few years have actually bought more water when times allowed it, when there was excess flows in the river. And that kind of provided a buffer for everyone else who was reducing their demand. We have a situation now where their reservoirs are full and spilling, and so they're reducing their deliveries at the same time everyone else is still kind of at a baseline. So it's a short term, maybe medium term time when we don't think demand is going to increase.
But maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems like during the summer, when residential users they're not gonna feel so motivated to conserve as they did in past years. So I would imagine that would make deliveries go up, wouldn't it?
We do, some of our contractors are forecasting increases in demand in the summertime. Others are not. And there's a lot of factors go into it.
Okay.
We have done a lot of conservation measures the last couple of years, and there's been some demand hardening where we don't anticipate a quick rebound as conditions change. But as you said, we'll see where the weather is when we get to summertime and where demand starts to creep up.
And it's really hard for us to predict what demands are going to be going forward. We just don't know because we have so many customers and they all, like Jake said, they have different ways of, some have groundwater resources, some have reservoirs. So they don't all use all of our water and we just don't know from time to time. But we can say that 15 years ago, we had 60,000 acre feet in deliveries. We're at 41,000 acre feet in deliveries today. And over the average for that 15-year period was 48,000 acre feet. We're budgeting at 41,800 acre feet. So it's hugely, it's a 3-year drought. I mean, this is unprecedented, right? And it's really driven down the deliveries. Will they start to climb back up? We expect that they might. We just don't know the time frame for that to happen. And so it is somewhat of a wait and see. But as deliveries do increase, that will certainly have an impact on reducing, the overall rate increases going forward.
And I would just say too, so our use of fund balance. So one way we build up fund balance is if deliveries do come in higher than we're budgeting this year, our fund balance for next budget season would be higher and we'd be able to offset rate increases that year. So,
right.
We every year we look at what the fund balance is and we take every effort to reduce that to keep the rate low.
And we've been using fund balance, right? I mean, we built up fund balance in years where there was more water deliveries. And we've been using that fund balance during the drought, but we're running out, right? Because we're now in year 3 of a drought. So we've run down, we don't have as much fund balance to use to bring the rate down even further. But as deliveries start to go back up, we're hoping that will change, right? And we'll be able to build fund balance going forward.
Well, that was actually addressing one of my follow-up questions, which is I saw in the restructured agreement, it says if there's an excess in operations and maintenance, it can be used to pay capital costs but are you saying that, that was my question were there additional capital projects that could be funded this year if we had excess funds, or would it just go into paying back the fund balance?
Actually, this year we are not using any fund balance from the water transmission and operations and maintenance fund to fund capital projects. Capital projects are funded completely from the capital fund balance and grants and bond financing. So, and we have enough bond financing in there to fund as many capital projects as we're able to do. So that's not driving the rate increase at all.
No, I understand that. I'm sorry, I'm maybe speaking wrong with it. It says that they could be used to pay capital costs on common facilities and storage. So you're saying they're not really
We're not
used
doing
that
this
way?
year.
Okay.
$0 from that fund. that you're
Even if we come
referencing.
in with a bunch of excess money, it's just going to go into the.
Oh, in a future year,
Yeah.
potentially it could be used, but
Okay.
at the moment, we did go out for bond funding in 2022. We got a $15 million bond that should cover us for a couple of years. We locked in when interest rates were at their lowest level. And we have a AAA bond rating, but I mean, one of the other restrictions is we do have bond covenants that we need to cover. And so we can't reduce the rate farther without dropping below our debt covenant.
And actually using that money actually increases the rate. If we take that money from, that excess money that you're talking about there in the O&M fund and we send it over to do capital projects, that does increase the rate increase. So what we've done this year is said, no, we're not going to do that at all. So we tried to do that to keep the rate increase from being even higher.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one question. In your kind of simplistic rate calculation slide, it's presented as if your operating cost, total budget is kind of a fixed number that doesn't have anything to do with volume. Presumably, some of your costs actually scale with volume, but it's probably a fairly small chunk.
It is fairly small. Yeah, I mean, we have chemical costs and utility costs are the two that are the most variable based on usage. The majority of the others are pretty fixed.
It's probably what, 80%?
Like closer to 90%.
90% fixed.
95% fixed costs on the water transmission system.
So any deliveries over that 41,000 is 90% of that is not going to go to expenses to fund the extra deliveries. It will.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for the budget. And as usual, I really appreciate all the detail. I was able to answer a bunch of my questions because you guys are thorough in putting the information. So I'd have a question on one page and I was able to find it later on. So I really appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions. So on the deferred maintenance items, there's a whole list of them there. I'm assuming that these are a low risk, or you wouldn't have put them on there. Is that a fair assumption, that you don't think any of these are gonna go astray on us?
We worked with all of our staff, all the project managers to prioritize these projects and select the lowest risk ones.
Okay.
And the ones that we weren't confident we would definitely get done
Okay.
this fiscal year.
Okay, because that always worries me. And then this question might be more of a Craig question. And that is, how comfortable do you feel with us putting our capital charges to zero? I noticed we had a pretty healthy amount, although we're using we had like 8 million and we're using like 3+ million. So it's going to kind of leave us low. How comfortable are you with that?
Well, the projects that were highlighted there as being recently completed on the Petaluma Aqueduct, move that forward, and that we've actually, the water agency has completed a couple of pretty significant, the Eli Booster Station and another one. So we're saving up for the next one. The primary thought was that if not this year, what year, to actually use that as a rate leveling tool. And there is fund balance in there. So there's the hope there, and the risk is that we're able to bring that back next year and build it back up over the next few years as the demands recover.
Because typically we lowered the amount, but not usually zero. I think this is the first time that I've seen it at zero, and I just wanted to feel confident with that. And then my last question is also probably a Craig question. And that is, in the financial considerations, you talk about the fact that we can increase this increase by offsetting with local groundwater pumpage and operational savings. Groundwater pumping, we now, based upon Sigma, we now pay for that. So my concern is that water still cheaper than what this water is? Because it's not like it's free, because we have to pay, and we have to pay based upon what we pump the groundwater now. Did we kind of look at that analysis to see whether that,
Yes, our pumping our own groundwater is significantly cheaper
Okay.
than using Sonoma water. So it is an option that's available to us. We, to help out with the region trying to achieve a 20% delivery reduction, we, as one of the few agencies that have significant groundwater for our demands, we went ahead and pumped a lot of groundwater as a proportion. So we usually stay within like a 3/4, 1/4 split, with 1/4 coming from groundwater. We moved that up to like 40% or so with our local groundwater. And we saw the results in our budget. So we're pretty confident that it is less costly. And we were able to look at the impact once the well's shut off, what that residual elevation is. And there was not a chronic dropping of that elevation over the two years that we increased the pumpage. So one, it's the water's stable source of water for us. It's less costly. So.
And is it consistent with what we put in the groundwater plan? Are we within the ranges of what we said we would do? Because we all had to, kind of highlight what we would use from a plan perspective for the next X number of years.
So the regional GSA plan, we're like such a small amount.
I know, but if everybody increased to 40%, because of I just am concerned.
I haven't
we
taken a
gave a
look at that.
range, you know, I have no idea what that range is, but if we said we'll never go over 30% and now we're at 40, are we, you know, somehow impacting that? And if we do it and everybody does it, that's kind of what I'm getting at. It seems good on paper, but, you know, are we hurting something else? And that's all I'm concerned about. It's
Yeah,
a
remember
balance.
providing those numbers. I'll revisit those and see
okay.
how far off we are.
Okay, and to kind of talk to your concerns, I mean, it's unusual that we've been in a drought for 3 years. Not only is it unusual that we've been in this drought for 3 years, if you go back and you look at the weather, we've also had a lot of hot weather. In addition to that, if you kind of look at the monthly stuff on water usage, you know, we're kind of peaking up and peaking across, you know, much longer because it was getting hotter earlier and it was staying hotter for long periods of time. So that affects people's water use. I know a lot of folks have let their landscaping die, you know, which is, you know, not necessarily a good thing. And when it heats up early, obviously, here we are today with it pouring down rain. You know, last year, people were already turning on their sprinkler systems because it was dry. So we just kind of are in this really kind of wonky place where we can't seem to catch a break with the weather. So hopefully that will, you know, the weather people will be better to us in the future. So while it does seem very painful, I do appreciate all the detail. I appreciate all the work that the subcommittee did. And, you know, this council is relatively new. I really appreciate the working with all of the subcontractors, the water contractors on this, because I know it wasn't always so. And I can attest to that. And I really appreciate the hard work. It really sounds like you really sharpened your pencils, understanding that, you know, it's high, but, you know, to keep it less high than it could be. I mean, the fact that, you know, some of the earlier numbers were in the 20% range is really hard to swallow. And hopefully we can not have to adjust our 5-year plan, you know, earlier than anticipated. And hopefully we can do that. But this water stuff, we can't seem to catch a break on. And the conservation, it seems counterintuitive to, you know, go out and spend on that, but it really does. I kind of put it with like the landfill. When I first started on council, our landfill was supposed to close, you know, and they had not a very good plan for it closing. And we've been able to extend that use of the landfill for decades and decades because people have done the right thing. And I think water conservation is the same thing. So in the long run, although it's painful now, in the long run, it keeps us from having to do more severe things in the future. So with that, any other questions? Okay, then I will open this up for public comment unless you guys have something. Okay, well, thank you for answering our questions. I will open this up for public comment and I'll start with Zoom.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, and then I will open this up for public comment for those here in the audience. And I'm not seeing anybody running, and you guys obviously. Then I will bring it back to the council. We'll close public comment on this. And what is the pleasure of the council? Oh, yes.
Well, I just wanted to make one comment that if a household conserves 20% of their usage and sees their rate go up by 10%, they still see a cut in their water bill. So in general, I think we have to recognize that we historically don't value water at what it's now going to be worth, and we're going to have to face the fact that it's going to become more expensive going forward. So I appreciate efforts to keep the cost down, but also I recognize that we treat it like it's free and it's not. We got to get over that, and we're getting there.
That's a very good point.
And I would be I would support that our WAC member voting in favor of the budget.
And I forget, do we need a motion for this? I forget.
Yes, it's adopt a motion to direct
you.
the WAC advisory member.
Thank you. Yes.
Comment.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I wanted to thank you for coming and for answering all my questions. And I was looking at some of the maintenance projects and things and looking at what year they were originally scheduled to happen, which was several years ago for most of them. So I'm just really happy to see them getting done and supportive of trying to get them done as quickly as we can.
And I will say that the Dry Creek project is a lot less expensive than what the alternative was, because that was scary looking numbers. So, and it's really wonderful that we've been able to work with the Army Corps of Engineers. They've really stepped up and it's doing its job, which is great. So with that, then I will be happy to entertain a motion. Did you?
Sure. I'm happy to move that we to our Water Advisory Committee member to endorse the proposed Sonoma County Water Agency 23-24 budget.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So are you a no or an abstain or you have three choices. I give you choices.
I mean, I.
Okay, so WAC member, do you have your direction?
Thank you for the directions.
And thank you again for the presentation, answering our questions. Really appreciate it. So with that, we can move on to discussion on city investments and management. My guess is probably going to be Angela. Yeah.
Damien can absolutely take this one too. It's all good. So good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the public, online and here in person. The presentation tonight is for getting your input on investments and the consideration of a transition to a more active management strategy of our investments. The Administrative Services Department has had an objective for fiscal year 22-23 to evaluate these investment processes and hopefully implementing council's actions. With this, we have been looking towards other programs, firms, cities, and what they've implemented as best practices, what effective programs and groups are out there for investments. We were first introduced to Optum Investment Partners, who we have collaborated with today to bring you this informational presentation. In this presentation, we'll provide a summary of public agencies' investment requirements, permitted investments, portfolio management types, the industry challenges of government investments, a brief analysis of Cotati and our investments, and ending with kind of projected next steps depending on which way we want to move forward. So with this, I'll turn it over to David or maybe Rob to continue with our presentation. They should be on our group here.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent.
Hi, David.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. We appreciate your time tonight. My name is David Bilby, CEO of Optum Investment Partners. Just to give you a brief background, I've been in government finance for 18 years. Most recently with the city of Chula Vista, managing a $400 million investment portfolio there. Recently, we formed our company to assist small agencies with investment advisory services in the state of California. We're excited to give this presentation tonight to inform you about the public agency requirements and to answer any questions you have about public investments. With that, we'll go to the next slide. So public agency investment requirements are clearly delineated in Government Code Section 53600. The city of Cotati is doing a great job currently meeting all of its reporting requirements, going to the governing body, outlining cash and assets invested and all the various requirements of the government code related to those quarterly reports. In addition, city of Cotati is reviewing an annual investment policy during its budget process. And so it is compliant with that section as well. The main piece that we're going to be talking about tonight, the prudent investor standard, it's basically the requirement for all of us, us as advisors, you as public officials, to be a fiduciary and safeguarding the principal and ensuring liquidity of public funds. Third on the list of priorities in the government code, section 53600, is yield. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that in the slides to come up. Next slide, please. In your current investment policy, you have permitted investments that range throughout the government code, section 53601. I like your existing investment policy. We've been working with your team and looking at ways we can continue to improve upon the policy on a go-forward basis. And we'll be talking about that at future council meetings. The 3 items on this slide and the next slide that are listed as no really are ones that I would consider higher risk. And if you go to the next slide, you can see mortgage-backed securities, specifically collateralized securities and public bank securities. Those were all in the highlight reel of the 2007, 8, 9 timeframe, where mortgage-backed securities were inappropriately measured in terms of risk and ultimately had several defaults back in the 2000s. I think it's prudent that you're staying away from those. They are not necessary to have a diversified portfolio, and your city has sufficient permitted investments within its policy to achieve the desired outcomes of safeguarding of principal, ensuring liquidity, and ultimately obtaining market rates of yield. With that, we'll go on to the next slide. So the one key difference about what we're going to be talking about tonight is passive management versus active management. Passive management is in which you allow your funds to sit idle in various accounts, whether that's a checking account, a state pool, a county pool, or some other type of investment in which you're not moving money actively in and out. These are safe options. They're all fully backed or collateralized. So they do meet that first priority in the government code section of safety of principal. They also are extremely liquid, which is a great benefit as well. So it clearly meets the safety and liquidity, but unfortunately it's not going to obtain market yields very often. On occasion, a pool can reach market yields, but it's fairly rare and it doesn't hold on for very long. We'll talk about why that is. So active management allows for the city to be able to, whether it's in-house or using outside parties, to identify how it can achieve market rates of yield over a time period of 5 years, which is the allowed time horizon in the government code section. And the various requirements of active management mean there's more dedicated staff time, whether that's in-house or a consultant advisor. It requires somebody to keep an eye on the market on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to look at how we can take advantage of market opportunities and ultimately to improve yields up to market yields while not sacrificing that risk in maintaining a very low risk on the portfolio and maintaining that liquidity. So we're definitely in favor of your existing investment policy and continuing to revise that on an annual basis to ensure that it's meeting the council goals and objectives through your budget process. We also have introduced a new item for our services related to cash flow modeling. So what this does, it allows us to be able to identify when your city is running short on cash due to the timing of revenues and expenditures in your budgetary cycle. And what that enables us to do is keep more money actively invested throughout that 5-year time horizon, increasing overall performance and investment interest. And we can continue to utilize the investment types that are supported by the city and within your policy, so you don't have to worry about us taking any additional risk. With that, we'll go on to the next slide. So Angela mentioned some of the industry challenges very briefly. It's interesting to us because the 2 largest investment advisors in the state of California, they do not currently contract with agencies less than $25 million in assets. So small agencies typically do not have the large finance departments with dedicated staff and expertise in this specific area. There's a lot of specialized fields in finance. Debt is one, investments is another, underwriting, and legal, for example, are areas in which you hire outside for bond counsel, for advisors, for municipal advisors. So it's highly technical, and ultimately you get better ultimate performance when you look at how you can take advantage of those technical experts in the field. So obviously, one of the challenges facing every agency in California, we would all like to have more revenue for equipment, pay down debt, facility maintenance, deferred maintenance, enhanced services, and to ensure to taxpayers that we are doing the absolute best we can without taking any unnecessary risk related to their money that we're managing on their behalf. We'll go to the next slide, please. So what we did is we looked at, this is a slide that shows market interest rates. These change every day. So today's might be slightly different than when we prepared this PowerPoint for your agenda item. But you can see on the top, this is City of Cotati's most recent financial statement balances as it relates to cash on hand, which is money in a checking account, essentially, and LAIF, which is the local agency investment fund, which is the state of California's investment pool. You can see the yield of 0 and 2.12. LAIF continues to go up. It's a little closer to 2.6 today, but ultimately you can see below market interest rates are well above 4%. So what we would recommend to the city is to look to obtain a strategy and an investment model that allows you to obtain those 4.25%, 4.5% yields that are listed on your screen, but maintaining the low risk and permitted investments within your policy, and allowing for high liquidity to ensure operational needs are met. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. I think the next slide, Angela's going to take the presentation back, but we're here to answer any questions that you have about what was presented, what's in the government code, and any other questions you have about investments in the government sector.
Thank you, David. So yes, so really on this slide, we want to present our goal to move to what is being presented as an active management policy for our investments. As you can see, while we're still earning investment income, we are not providing and getting the yields that we could if we had a more active participation within these pieces. Not that we haven't had it in the past, we did previously and included in the staff report, collaborate, and we used RBC. And so it was kind of that in between active and passive where we worked with them to purchase a few CDs that were at a good rate that were within 2 years, and we had some of those laddered, but it really wasn't taking that additional next step of looking at our cash flow and our cash flow management. We were more looking at, okay, this is how much we think we have in reserves that we can hold in CDs in, for our the next, year or so. So we would like to move back towards that active management, as well as moving forward with bringing back an investment policy to council in April, because we do want to have that prudence and continue the discussion as to how this is going to be implemented and what our policies are around this, and evaluate the contracts for bringing on this investment advisory services of OPI, as well as the additional resources we would need to implement those resources using a custodial bank, as well as a broker dealer for any of those transactions. We have, as we've stated previously, been researching and looking into all this. So we do have others that we have spoken to and have identified as a good source, and would like to continue our relationship with, to move it past into an actual process and policy. And so that's what we would bring back to council as a discussion item in April, and hopefully implementation. And then once we have that happening, if we do move into this direction, we would bring them on board and executing trades and getting these laddered strategy to meet our cash flows going forward. There would be ongoing meetings with ourselves, both Damien and myself, with the investment advisory services on a monthly basis, in order to make sure we're incorporating that continuously into our quarterly reports to council for our financials. Again, that investment and cash section of the quarterly report will become much more substantial because it will no longer just be, 15 million in LAIF and so much in SCIP, because it would then be more diversified from the single pooled funds. And so this is where we can turn it over to you for questions about more information about OPI or what we would like to do moving forward and get direction from council.
Sure. Yeah, I had a question. I was just researching OIP and trying to figure out, they're a newer organization. Do they have other jurisdictions that they work with? And is there examples of the yields that they've been able to obtain for some of the other agencies?
Absolutely. Go ahead, David. I'm going to let you hit that one off to speak for yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I put this program in place about 1.5 years ago with the city of Paramount and the city of Placentia. Those are cities with about $40 and $60 million. Those are referral clients that we refer to the city of Cotati as examples of ones that have been in place long enough to see the track record. The city of Paramount went from about $300,000 in investment revenue to $1.5 million this year using our services. Really, we do have some advantages with the interest rates going up, so that certainly did play a part in that performance, but the vast majority of their money was sitting in a pool that would have gotten them less than half, similar to what the city of Cotati is. So looking at the improvement for your city, it'd be similar in terms of almost doubling your interest revenue projection based upon the cash flow modeling we would do and getting all that money getting to work for you on a higher interest level. We also have 2 brand new clients, Georgetown Public Utility District and Oceano Community Services District. So yes, we are a new company. I've been doing investments in government for 18 years, but I saw this specific area of the market that was untouched. There's not a lot of folks out there that are actively pursuing. We have almost 40 agencies that we're working with on a contract negotiation and a move forward, the same steps that we've been working with the city of Cotati on. So we have a list of cities that we believe will be onboarding with us over the next few months.
Ben?
Sure, thanks. I think this one is also for David, but Angela, maybe both of you. Why does LAIF get half the market rate? Are they restricted in what they can invest in dramatically more than we're restricted?
This is absolutely one of the slides I was having in there. It's a trailing. Their market trails, and David can speak a little bit more to this, the treasury, because of how they're structured. So we were actually earning more than the market during COVID. So LAIF was earning more because they had more securities that were out farther. And so they had already laddered all those. So we were actually earning more through LAIF. But now that the market is increasing, interest rates are increasing, it's a trailing. And so it's starting to pick back up, but it ebbs and flows.
So it's trailing and damped. I mean, I presume it doesn't have the same highs or this, maybe not as low. Well, it can't go below 0. So,
yeah. Doesn't go below 0. It does have fair market value adjustments, but that's a whole nother story. So I don't know that I could speak to it. I just know I've seen the historical trends of it compared to like the 3-year treasury and the market, and it's always a trailing. It doesn't go above it, but it is a trailing.
But it sounds like you're saying then that their investment policy is even more conservative than ours.
Absolutely.
And that produces the longer term investments and more bond funding.
Bond funding,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always heard of it as treasury based, but I mean, maybe David knows a little bit more about LAIF and what their investment, what they invest in compared to what, a city might invest in.
They're going to invest in the same types of securities. As a matter of fact, they're going to invest in treasuries and agencies. They're going to invest in state and municipal bond debt and CDs and bank debt as well. The key difference between LAIF and some of the other pools is LAIF must maintain they do maintain a duration of about 1 to 2 years. So when you look at that, they have 3 and 4 year treasuries that they invested in back in before and during the pandemic when interest rates were very low. So ultimately, they've got treasuries in their portfolio that are yielding 50 basis points or 80 basis points or 1%. So yes, they do trail. They lag on the way up and they lag on the way down. Cities don't have to lag on the way up and lag on the way down. We can take advantage of the full yield curve and be able to consistently beat them. There are rare occasions, like when COVID hit, that LAIF was the highest performing investment for a short period of time because the Fed reduced rates so quickly. All of the treasury rates went to the floor. LAIF still had a portfolio of 3 and 4 and 2-year treasuries in their portfolio. So it was still earning in the high 2s when interest rates went below 1.
Okay, thanks. And then one more question. I presume that the investment advice is priced at a percentage of portfolio. And so how much above LAIF would we have to earn? Or is that market rate sort of net of investment costs? You know, the market rate, the current 4.5%, say, on your slide, is that?
Angela, would you like me to answer, Angela, or would you like to take this question?
Yes, no, I think that would be absolutely appropriate for you to address the fees.
So the industry standard term is assets under management. And so depending upon how much assets, that determines how the fee structure is. For the size city that you are, we quoted 12 basis points. So if we're going to get you about 425 basis points on your portfolio, the charge is not performance based. It is based upon how much we're managing for the city. So it's possible rates could go back down in the future and go back down to 200 basis points or 250 basis points, but our fee remains the same at that 12 basis point level. So that includes all the reporting, investment policy review and adoption, staff reports, monthly meetings, and educational sessions for the public.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Yes.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, one of which is brand new. I thought I had seen 0.25% of assets under management somewhere in what I read. Am I imagining that, or is that the same as 12 basis points? What is, for a newbie like me, can you explain what 12 basis points comes out to in like percentage or?
So 12 basis points would be 0.12.
Okay, it's 0.12%.
So, yeah, so it's an error in the staff report. You
Yeah.
did actually.
I did read
that.
0.25%.
You did, yeah.
Okay.
You're not crazy, yeah.
And we pulled that from their informational online because we weren't intending on bringing forward their contract yet. So this has
Okay.
just been a discussion.
So that's actually a much lower fee than what I had thought.
Yeah,
Changes
that's an
things a lot.
accurate fee for an agency with, let's say, $5 million. So we continue to lower our fee as the assets under management go up because it's a kind of an economies of scale kind of thing. So 12 basis points is what we charge for all clients with $10 to $20 million in assets under management.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, when I hear we're going to get market rate yields without market rate risk, that sounds I'm a little skeptical of that. So can you explain how, why is that not too good to be true?
So we're going to take the risk that the current funding in LAIF is taking, which is investing in federally backed treasuries, federal backed agencies, CDs that are backed by the FDIC and collateralized investments. Your investment policy does allow you or us to extend out on that risk spectrum. It's not necessary to do that. So we do not have to do that in order to achieve market yields. The federal treasury rate or the federal treasury notes are considered market rate for purposes of investment advisory performance review. And so if you look at a federal treasury note, let's say a 3-year treasury is earning 3.8% today. There's a variety of ways that we can outperform that because federal agencies sell at a slight premium to federal treasuries. CDs sell at a slight premium to federal treasuries. And some of these individual pools will perform at market rate. And so it's possible to achieve slightly above market treasury rate yields by investing, let's say, for example, if we bought some Toyota Motor Corp investments, they might be trading at a 30 basis point yield spread or improvement over federal treasuries because they may have a risk assigned to them, even though they're rated AAA by Standard & Poor's. So we can talk at a future session about a specific investment strategy, how much on the risk spectrum does the city want to be? Because your policy allows for some risk to be taken. But even if we took no risk at all, just investing in federally backed and collateralized securities, we can be above the federal treasury rate yield performance today.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question, maybe this is for Angela, I'm not sure. If we were a larger, what is the fee structure that's typical for larger cities? Like,
So larger cities, so coming from auditing counties and larger cities, they have treasury departments where they come, I was talking to Damian briefly about it. It was great when I got to go and audit them because you would show up at 3 o'clock in the morning when stock exchange opens in New York and they're looking at their cash flows. They get the reports from the other departments, figure out what their cash, I mean, basically what David and them are doing is they do it on a larger scale. They have a staff and a team that evaluate what cash they need on hand, what's maturing, what they need to move, what they need to purchase, what the length of time for the purchase is, what the ratings are of those to make sure they're balancing out those risks and compliance with their policies. And so that's really what a large city and or county are going to do. They have a full treasury department that is managing their surplus funds. And again, these are considered surplus funds. And so that's what the government code does oversee is surplus funds. And there is that idea of liquidity and making sure we have those contingency funds and that we're monitoring those. So I hope that addressed your question. If there's a little bit more detail you want, so it's maybe smaller cities, they also have a treasury or a finance position where that's where they're doing is they look at the different pools. I know other smaller cities in Sonoma County, really they just look to what they have in the pools. And maybe they've also been working with, I do know a couple of them have been working with broker dealers directly. So they're trying to do the cash flow piece of it, or kind of what we were doing before, where they just say, well, we have approximately $5 million of surplus funds that we want to move to more of an active. And they work with the broker dealer directly in the bank and say, what CDs, what other investments can we put these funds in that we can feel secure about the laddering for them. So it's kind of bypassing that investment management piece of it and going directly with just saying overall, I think we have around 5 million that we need to not have to worry about.
that makes sense. I guess the genesis of my question was just thinking about if we were to, I know this is like fantasy land, but if we were to pool our resources with other small cities, like could we achieve a lower fee structure, something like that?
So I think that was really the genesis of CAMP and CLASS and all these other pooled investment funds, as they were other cities and jurisdictions that wanted to be able to do that. And so we are allowed, we can buy into those other groups of pooled funds where then they have a say of what's going to be invested in. It's kind of like what we talked about our 115 trust, where you pick your risk level and that's what you buy into, you know, for a certain amount of, again, you designate certain dollar amounts you're going to have in there at a certain point in time, what liquidity levels you want in those other pools. And so those are what came out of those kind of wanting to pool with your neighbors to better manage and better direct those funds, the surplus funds for investments. And so those are available, but there's currently nothing in the county other than Sonoma County does have an investment pool. We do have some funds with their investment pool, but there's really no one else that we're looking at in the county that are looking to do a group treasury, a separate pooled investment funds.
Okay.
I think David has something to add.
If I could help with a few of the discussion points there, you'll see with public RFPs for investment advisory services, it's a scale that as you go up in assets, you'll see the fees go down. So if you looked at a city with $200 million, the bids will come back around 6 basis points. 5 to 6 basis points is what you'll see in the marketplace. For example, for the city of Placentia, they're in the $20 to $40 million bracket. All this is public information. A registered investment advisor, registered with the state of California, and ultimately FINRA has to disclose what their fees are going to be. So it's 10 basis points for city of Placentia for the work that I'm doing for them. It's 8 basis points for the city of Paramount because they're in the $40 to $60 million bracket. So again, their fees are slightly higher overall, but the basis point rate is lower, as you said, because you get economies of scale. Unfortunately, the pooled idea that you're talking about, I haven't seen one that exists in terms of multiple local agencies coming together to form their own pool, because the government code requires a JPA to be formed, and that JPA would have to have its own board. And so then you would lose the individuality of the decision-making, and the reporting requirements remain the same. So there's not a significant reduction in the workload required. If the city of Cotati is looking at active management, ultimately, if you invest in a pool, there's about 5 good pools out there right now you can invest in, but they do not give you the power to invest in whatever you want. They will not do cash flow analysis. They won't sit down with you on a monthly basis and go over what you want to do with it. It'll just be an option similar to LAIF, similar to the county pool. And so it's really difficult for the government code to account for individual JPA pools, because they don't actually have like an authority that's looking at the content of the action. So you ultimately have this board that's making decisions on your behalf. I don't know if I touched on all 3 of your points about fees and structures and being able to save money, but each agency is required to do their own individual reporting. So that's kind of critical to the steps in the government code section of those quarterly reports and ensuring that you have sufficient capital and liquidity for operations.
Well, thank you very much.
Kay, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi. This is sort of piggybacking on what she said, that it's been my experience that the higher the potential for return, the higher the risk. And I'm seeing on the slide that both say safe. And I'm just curious, I understand it's FDIC insured, but it's been my experience, you can still, lose your shirt. And so how are these investments, whether they're high yield or low yield, how are they safe?
I think one clear idea to understand right now is your checking account money and the money in the state pool is at a higher level of risk than what we're talking about today. So if you have $2 million in your checking account and it's only FDIC covered up to 250,000, you have exposure there. So there's money that's exposed. Obviously, this weekend's actions with the federal government coming in and rescuing multiple banks is an interesting one. It goes against what the FDIC limits were created to do. But we're living in kind of a new world right now, just this week, as a matter of fact. But to answer your question, LAIF, for example, is investing in the same things, but they're not obviously obtaining market yield. So there's interest rate risk and opportunity risk there that you're not getting that same level of risk ultimately. When we start getting into the individual discussions of the 21 different permitted investments and the 18 that you allow in your policy, that's where we can get into the details of, do you want to go AA rated and how do you want to modify? So when we spoke to the agency, to the city originally, we recommended only federally backed, because if the federal government defaults, you're going to have a whole different slew of problems as a government entity in this country if the federal government isn't paying its bills. You could see that grants would go away and federal housing and streets and all those types of funds would go away. So there isn't a safer investment in the world than a US federal treasury note. But if I'm not answering your question quite right, please let me know and I'll try to identify how we're reducing the risk back to essentially zero of the risk of the federal government defaulting.
Yeah, so maybe this is, not the right forum for this. And maybe this is more about, later on, but I'm not questioning the federal government, the failure of the federal government. I'm asking about, so, I know of investments that were FDI insured and yet they still tanked. And so I'm just curious about how these ones are safe when other ones are not.
So anything covered by FDIC limits is fully insured. So nobody, no business, no bank has ever taken a loss on FDIC covered assets. It's only when they exceed FDIC coverage that there's been exposure. LAIF is collateralized. So the money that you have, the 15 million that you have invested today is not FDIC covered. It's invested and collateralized, meaning that the majority of the money is in assets that can be liquidated and there's no leverage being taken. So a typical bank, the reason banks default is because they buy too many bonds at a low interest rate, and then they leverage up and lend out a majority of their funds to people that want car loans and mortgages and things like that. And then there becomes a run on the bank like happened this weekend. And then you'll see that they have to sell assets at a loss, and ultimately they're unable to support the liquidity needs. A public agency in California is very different than a bank. You are not going to be investing with leverage. You're not trading on margin. You're not, going out on some risk spectrum of trying to double or triple your money or things like that. It's not allowed in the government code section. So the FDIC coverage is sound. There's never been a loss on FDIC covered assets. And at the end of the day, because the federal government has never defaulted and likely never will, because they have the ability to print money, your investments in those are as safe or safer than any other investment type allowed in the government code section.
And if I can jump in, I think it might be also part of it is a misnomer. When everyone talks about the market, right, they're talking about the stock market. Whereas right here in the presentation, we're really just trying to even get the treasury, what we could invest in and have some secure, even the 1 month yield of 4.3%, even if we put this into that for 1 month, that could get us to that market rate where we're getting those returns. So we're not trying to beat the stock market and be in highly risky areas. We're still trying to stick to those, even trying to meet the treasury, what's out there in the open market right now.
Okay, I feel like that's probably what I was asking.
Yeah.
Thank you. Both. Thank you both.
So can I put it in my simple terms? So it sounds like that LAIF is not really active. And the reason that they're not active is because they put the money in longer term things. I think I heard him say 1 to 2 year things. Whereas in an active management of it, we would be looking at shorter terms and moving things around maybe in 1, 2, 3, 6 month increments in order to achieve whatever it is has the best rates at those points. And LAIF kind of has stuff tied up for a very long period of time, it sounds like. Whereas these would be shorter term and it's active because we're constantly moving stuff around in shorter timeframes. Is that the gist of what?
So LAIF is an active fund from their perspective. So they've got a team of investment advisors that work for the state under that fund, and they are buying and selling investments, investing at all times. The key difference is LAIF is required to maintain sufficient liquidity for anybody that invests with them. So if you ask for your 15 million back tomorrow, LAIF has to give that to you. So it exposes them to market rate risk. So meaning they have to sell, sometimes they have to sell at a loss. They have to sell investments that are earning 2%, but the market is saying it should be paying 4%. So they might lose $100,000 on selling a $5 million bond in order to create the liquidity needed for the agencies to ask for their money back. From the city of Cotati's perspective, LAIF is passive because you are not in control of those investments. We still recommend investing out over that 5-year horizon because it's best practice to diversify not only over investment type, but over time. I can show you in a future presentation how the city of Chula Vista was able to earn significantly more than its peers because when COVID hit and interest rates dropped, we had sufficient investments or significant investments invested out 3, 4, and 5 years. So when everybody else's interest rates dropped to 0, we were still earning well over 3%. And then the slide down was much slower for us at Chula Vista than it was for other agencies. So the best practice is to follow the yield curve, which says that longer rates will pay a little bit more. Like if you walk into a bank, a longer CD typically pays a little bit more than a shorter CD. And that's essentially what we're doing is we're laddering those investments over time. But LAIF has separate mandates. LAIF has to keep more money liquid, and they have the risk of selling assets at a loss if they don't have sufficient liquidity. We're not going to recommend the city of Cotati to invest money that they think they're going to have to sell. That's why we pay so much attention to the cash flow modeling and operational capital, grant and other needs, so that we leave sufficient liquidity so you never have to suffer a market loss for selling assets, if that makes sense.
So is another way of saying you're laddering is that kind of like diversifying over time?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Rather, okay. Any other questions? Okay. So let's see, this is just a review and discuss. So are we all where we need to be? Damien, did you have any?
Yeah. Did we have public comment yet?
I was going to go there if we were done with where we were at.
Yeah, reviews and just, but provide feedback too at the end of it.
Okay.
You know, if the council is comfortable moving forward in this direction, we can come back with a more detailed discussion about how it might apply here.
Thoughts on that aspect? Okay, with.
You want to do that before public comment? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
we can-
comfortable proceeding with this.
Okay.
The 12 basis points is less than I expected. I wish I could get investment advice for that cheap, but I suppose if I had 15 million, I could.
I'm also comfortable moving forward, especially since I see that we have the 0%, 2.12%, and that's really nothing, you know, so I'm interested also in helping Cotati.
You guys, this way?
I'd be interested to see an option when this comes back to, if we were to choose to just have an investment policy that directed us to invest in one of these pools without having an advisor. I'd like, because we could avoid fees that way, as small as they are. Not that that's the direction I want to go, but I'd just like to see what that would look like as an option.
I would be interested, just to make sure I bring back the right thing. Because one of the components is staff time, right? And so that is a significant piece of the managing those pieces, as well as the technical component of knowing what investments, you know, we still have to get that advice from somewhere to know what CDs are when. And so it would still include the broker dealer component to that, as well as pieces of staff time. And so is that what you would expect?
Yes, I would like to know kind of how much staff time would that take, and just to see if it's a feasible option. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So just for council's education, most and all pools charge an administrative fee because they have staff actually doing the work on their end. So if you look at LAIF's report and the county's report, typically it's between 8 and 10 basis points that they're charging as an administrative fee. So when you get your interest allocation from LAIF, they take their fee out of it. So it's not fee and no fee, it's fee and fee. One is passive, one is active. So there's a clear delineation between, they have a ton of staff at LAIF that are actually on payroll and benefited, and state employees that do require that administrative fee to be taken out.
So you kind of like the comparison of the fees?
Yes.
Is that?
And I have a follow-up question based on what you just said. If you were to become our investment advisor, would you advise us ever to invest in investments that also charged fees? So would there be any time where we would be paying you a fee and also paying a fee associated with one of the pools, or something that you're?
Yeah, that's a great question. And absolutely we would, because we have to put your interests first. So as a fiduciary, if we didn't put you in the absolute best performing investment with the least amount of risk and liquidity, we wouldn't be doing our job. And so there are investment advisors that will steer clear of pools because they decide to not charge based upon that. Our cash flow modeling essentially eliminates the underperformance essentially, because we keep so much more money invested in those pools. So if you're earning 400 basis points in LAIF, let's say, and we're charging 12 basis points and LAIF's charging 8, you're still making 380 basis points. Whereas if you just put it all into a pool and saw it go up and down, your average performance is going to probably be 100 to 150 basis points lower. So even though it is essentially double charging, there's separate work required. One is the fees related to the trades themselves, because LAIF is charging you for those investment trades. We're managing your cash flows, we're managing your reporting, your investment policy, and keeping an eye on the marketplace for you. So they're two different sets of services. So it's not paying twice for the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Is that clear? You clear on what?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm clear on what you're requiring,
Okay.
would like to see come back when we have, contracts.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I feel comfortable moving forward with this organization. Seems solid and I feel comfortable with it. I think I would like to see Katati, use those resources in a more positive way for our city.
okay. I will open this up for public comment at this point in time, and I've lost our audience here. And so we will move to the Zoom attendees.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Thank you for that. So Angela, do you have enough direction from the council?
Yes, thank you for
Sounds
the
like
direction.
we are,
Forward to bring this back in April.
yeah, more information, more detail. So with that, we will move to item C, which we jumped over.
Okay, so we're back. So I think I got all the answers to the questions that you asked and you probably will ask. So, all right, so right now we are through the grant, we're subscribed to Vigilant like we talked about. That grant runs through 2026. It's been in place for, I think 2 years now. I don't know, time flies by, but I think it's been about 2 years. Anyway, we've had index at least 15. It looks like more stolen cars recovered through the ALPR. That's kind of what we've seen so far. Now, with regard to this contract, this is a 5-year agreement, as you all saw. The ALPR piece is bundled into the quote that's here. If you, and what it equates to, what the cost of the ALPR component equates to is in the bundled version is about $400 per car per year is what that service costs. So if it's unbundled, so in other words, if we decide not to do it, but add it later or something, that would be a little shy of $800 per car per year. So basically what that means is it would be the cost bundled is for all 4 cars for 5 years is $8,000. That's the $400 per car per year. Otherwise, it's $15,300 if it was unbundled and then added back. If that makes sense. And I also, once we initiate, and so anyway, that's, I guess I'll just keep it simple. That's the bundled versus unbundled cost service. And in terms of recovering stolen cars, I can attest to it being effective, at least in that respect.
Yes, okay.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we have this service already until 2026. So for the next 3 years. This contract is for 5 years, 3 of which we already have another company doing it.
It would go,
Correct?
right. Right. Yeah. So we have the other company sort of access point through 2026. This contract would take us through 2029. Yeah. But I mean, there's 3-year overlap there.
Yes. But
4-year.
am I understanding right? The vigilant system isn't going to work isn't going to integrate with the new EVs. So we would,
Right.
we wouldn't have, if we didn't buy this, we wouldn't have the ALPR on the new electric vehicles.
Right. It's not just the data access to the DOJ stolen car database. It's also the physical equipment that mounts on the car. And this type of equipment is, it doesn't need a steel roof to mount to. The Vigilant is just a different equipment style that needs to mount on a steel car roof. And those are the ones we have now, but they're on the old Dodge Chargers. And so they have steel roofs, and so they're able to mount on the top of the roofs near the light bar, where these are internally mounted in the cab of the car, pointed to the windshield. And they also point backwards to the compartment, the prisoner compartment.
Is there any possibility that we could get a refund on the years that we can't use because we can't use them on the electric cars, the Vigilant one?
Well, it's the equipment we
Cancel
bought.
the contract?
Well, the equipment we bought was only for the other cars. The EVs Vigilant doesn't make them for EVs, that type of equipment.
Oh, okay. So wait, so then the contract that we have for Vigilant doesn't work on these cars?
Right.
Right.
It only works.
So
on
then
the-
it's not double paying.
It's paying with, well,
Yeah, we still have the same ALPR service. It's just access through a different point, a different access point, basically.
Right. Okay. Because I guess I was understanding that
And we're
it
not paying
works on
for,
both of them, but it only works on the non-electric.
the Vigilant does, yeah. And Vigilant, we don't pay for because it's a grant. And this
Right.
would be one that we do pay for.
Okay, but so the issue is whether or not the community wants them, right? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Did you have another question?
no, I think that cleared it up.
Okay. This way?
Well, I'll just reiterate that I have a concern with storage for a long term. I'm highly suspect that any of those stolen cars were recovered based on something that was a license plate that was spotted 9 months ago. So I think storage of that data for a year is unsupportable. And so I'm not sure how to take that up and where to go with it. You know, I mean, I don't know if Axon has a setting in their software where we get to tell them how long we want our license plate data stored, because that's the issue I have with it.
Is there a way to find out of the 15 cars that were recovered, how long the time period was from when it was captured to when we recovered the stolen vehicle?
I'm not sure because it ends up in the DOJ database, which is basically just a plate number. And it just finds that plate number and says, hey, this car is missing or stolen.
But that's my point. It's got to already, the way the chief has described the recoveries is the camera on the car sees the license plate, immediately pings that the stolen car, and all of a sudden we've got a recovered car. It's not, we take an image, we store it for 9 months, then somebody puts in this car is stolen, and we say, oh, that car was in Cotati 9 months ago. That doesn't help us recover it. So there's no value to storing for a year every license plate we see in terms of recovering stolen cars. The only sort of purpose for that is for somebody to be able to tell where people were.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that level of detail exactly where you were and what, or is it, like you said, all of a sudden they're pointing at it and it says, oh my God, this is showing up in the DOJ database as a stolen car, which is different than.
Every single license plate that one of our readers goes by is stored in Axon's computer, according to what Vice Mayor Sparks and Dr. Damien said, for a year. That has no relevance to finding a stolen car at the moment. So,
Well, except that it lets the officer know that that's a stolen car, right?
no. The
Oh,
fact that it's
then I
sto-
misunderstood
The fact that
what
it's
he said.
stored for a year does not help that. It's the storage after scanning that I'm talking about, not the use when scanning to ping it against the database and say, that's a stolen car. So that storage after the fact is the piece that I would like to discuss further. And I'm not sure how to take that out.
So how does the
Yeah.
how does the fact that it's a stolen car get detected? Is that another database that somebody types in and says, here's the license plate? Is that what I just want to make sure.
Yeah, well, so I'm a little bit more familiar with the Vigilant, system because we've had it longer. And so, but basically, so Vigilant is on, there's like toll plazas, all have them, delivery trucks, Amazon trucks. I mean, basically they're kind of everywhere. And so Vigilant collects the data for like a year, right? And then purges it after a year. But if you're, it basically is a big database of plate numbers and I guess an attribute of location. And if someone is also another Vigilant customer, so there's another, and there's different products. There's public safety products, and then there's that has access to like the stolen plate registry. And then there's like general consumer products that don't have access to public safety ALPRs, but they have access to all the Amazon and FedEx ALPRs. And so there's two separate like databases that exist. And if you are a subscriber to Vigilant, for example, you have access to look up, like if you're looking for a certain plate number, you can look it up for that period of time that it exists in the Vigilant database until they purge it. That's my understanding of how it works. So
Anybody can look up or, yeah.
Well,
I
no,
can go
not
out there and give
not
them a
the-
plate
not-
number.
not the public safety one, but there's a commercial version of it that doesn't get public safety data. Like, so for example, our ALPRs
Mhm.
don't feed to that database. It's only a public safety database. But there's a commercial version of it. I'm just telling you, it's a commercial version that
So
companies use.
everybody's
for-
license plates that passes in front of an Amazon car, they're being snapped anyways.
I mean, it's
Going
po-
into this other side of this database.
It's, I mean,
Is that-
it's possible. It's possible. There's a commercial use for it. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
what they use it for, but there's a commercial side of it. But for law enforcement, it's only law enforcement ALPRs and the DOJ plates. So on the law side, my understanding of it is the value of it is that if like a car was seen a month ago and it wasn't stolen at that time, but then it got stolen, it was stolen and then it was added to the DOJ database. And then it would say, oh, hey, for investigative purposes, right? This car was located a month ago over here. And so that's why there's some residual storage. I mean, there definitely can be a conversation about how long that should be, but that's why there's a little bit of residual storage of just plate numbers.
And is to what Councilmember Ford said, every single plate that the car drives by, or is it activated when the body cam is activated?
Well, so the ALPRs are on when the car's moving around.
The
right?
car, okay.
Yep.
So every vehicle that goes by. Okay. So, I mean, yes, Kay.
Can we, is there, because I want to get the equipment ordered, right? I definitely want to have dash cams on the electric cars. So is there a way to, move forward with it, directing them not to store the images? Is there a way to do that?
Well, I think they have to store it for some period of time, but that's probably a discussion, like how long would that be,
Or how long would, how long do they require that it be stored? Maybe.
I don't know that they have a requirement for storage.
Then can we not store it?
But then how useful is it?
It's useful in the moment. It's useful for, if it flashes that it's stolen, then they can, recover the vehicle.
Is that true?
I think that's the purpose of doing
Well,
it. no?
that's what
I
want to be, I want to be clear here.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
If the car is currently stolen,
Mhm.
it'll flag it as stolen.
Okay.
If the car.
In real time.
In real time.
Okay.
Yeah. If the car is not yet stolen, but it drove by
Mhm.
and saw the plate and then it gets stolen a day later,
Mhm.
you would not know that, right? If if it doesn't store any data, it doesn't store any plates. So in other words, there would be no way to say the car was here a day ago or a week ago or whatever.
But that's not what I hear all of these guys saying. They're saying it does say it was here and it stays there for a year,
Yeah, yeah, no, that's,
which is what
yeah.
y'all seem to be
But
concerned
but
about.
the question I'm hearing is can you vary the storage length? And that's a discussion that I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'd like to say you can because it's the data we collect, but I don't know for sure.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think that you can't vary the length because the entire business model is they provide us the ability to flag, to detect stolen cars. And the cost that we pay for that is slight monetary fee, but mostly it's that we're surveilling everybody who comes through Katati and we're providing all that data to them for a year. And the people's data, the people's license plate location data is the product that they're selling. So they don't want us to not store it because that's how they're profiting off of the system. There are many civil liberties groups who think that this is a gross invasion of privacy and mass surveillance. So that's why it's a concern to me.
Oh, but there's cameras everywhere. I mean, that is a reality. We can't go anywhere anymore without there being cameras all over buildings and all, you know.
But we can choose whether we want to participate in that.
To make sure I'm clear, the law enforcement side is only available to other law enforcement agencies. So if like, for example, if someone had stolen a car, they drove through Katati, it wasn't reported stolen yet. But then it gets reported stolen a week later. And the car was stolen from, I don't know, San Rafael or somewhere, right? Some other agency. And they're trying to figure out what happened to the stolen car. They could go into the database and say, hey, it showed up in Katati a week ago, and then it showed up in Santa Rosa, 3 days later. I mean, that's what the storage of information would be used for in the law enforcement side. I can't really speak to the retail side, but there's a commercial side too. The data doesn't cross.
So sometimes they find them by tracking the path of where it's last been.
Mhm. Right.
And it might be parked within that community somewhere or dumped within that community somewhere.
Mhm.
And that might be the actual owner of the car. If it hasn't been reported stolen at the time that it's being driven through Katati, it may well be because it was not stolen yet. Right. And so that really doesn't give them information that's going to help them to find it.
But that's not what he said. He said it was stolen in Santa Rafael and they were trying to find it. And it kind of went through Katati and some other cities. So
The storage aspect's just an investigative tool to
Yeah,
try to
to
track the
investigate
movement of
it.
something, if they're trying to find out where it went.
Right. But my point is that the surveillance is happening before the crime. It's like Minority Report. Right.
But if you reported it stolen, that's what the agency is going to look for from that day forward. They're not going to look from that day backwards when it was in your possession.
That's exactly what he's saying. That's exactly what he's saying.
They would, I mean, I would think.
They're going to look, so my car is stolen today. You're telling me that the police department's going to go look to see where I was for the last month? Or are they going to go, my car was stolen today. Let's see if we find any places tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, forward, not backward.
Well, there's
The storage is back though.
yeah, I mean, they would be looking for it after the date of it was stolen.
But it's, they're going to only be looking at the data based upon the date stolen, not forever and ever for the last year. I mean, they only care about from the date it's stolen. They don't care where you've been as the owner, it's not helpful to them in getting your car back.
And I think
What-
that's the point. I think we're arguing in agreement,
Okay.
actually. Yeah. So I guess I want to go back to, can we have this piece of the contract
Okay.
removed
Okay.
and approve the rest of it?
Sorry, thank you.
Not just the storage, but this whole piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Sylvia?
Well,
Yeah, no, I had a question too. I know we're talking about stolen vehicles, but to someone's civil liberties point, would it be used for any other reason other than stolen vehicles? Can we put a limit of how it's used? I mean, what if someone was protesting and then just tried looking for someone's plates or something, just as an example?
But I thought you said that only the police department is allowed to.
well, law enforcement agencies would have
Law-
access to
sorry,
it. So it'd be, other.
But even that is limited to some extent. They can't just use it for any law enforcement purposes. I
Yeah.
believe there's a list of limited things they can use it for. It's highly regulated at this point.
Mhm.
It used to be more wide open. And I think some departments are buying the private information to use it for more intelligence purposes. There's only limited things that the law enforcement database can be used for.
So only
Yeah.
law enforcement, not.
Yeah, and
Just
I mean,
generic groups.
I don't know, legally, you have to have cause to search. You can't just randomly run plates for stuff. You have to have a cause.
And that's
Like-
true with the police department today. They have to have a reason to run your plate.
Yeah.
This might be getting too in the weeds, but anytime there's been a huge database, just a trove of data collected, it always seems to leak. There always seem to be security breaches. So that's a risk also, that this giant system's been constructed to surveil people's locations throughout the state. And we have to trust we don't really have much knowledge about how safe and secure that system is.
We could say that about our banks. We could
It's true.
say they're about our healthcare. We could, I mean, that is unfortunately
But I mean, the point, I
place
think,
we live in.
but the point I think she was making before was that's your choice, right? Like we are actively deciding that that's okay, that we're willing to take that risk for the benefit of having our money in a bank. And in this case, we're asking if we can, to have public comment on whether or not our city, the residents of Cotati want to take that risk.
So I just want to say that an assurance that only law enforcement has access is little solace to people who feel that law enforcement doesn't serve them. And there are many people who feel that. So there are many examples of law enforcement using access to data to go after protesters, for instance. And it's not, I don't think our police department does that, but we're putting this data into a statewide database that all law enforcement has access to. So there are plenty of examples of probable cause being improperly granted, for instance, things like that, warrants. Anyway, so I'm just saying that's not a fail-safe coverage for me. I would suggest, I would be comfortable approving this contract with an agreement to bring back a discussion of this particular use of, the particulars around the license plate recognition software and the parameters around storage and what options we have at a later date, meaning before it actually goes into action in January. I'd be comfortable doing that. I think the use for retrieving stolen cars is a good one, and I would like to see that. So that's where I'm landing.
Well, my preference would be to approve the contract without the ALPR until we can have that discussion, but I would certainly be happy to have that discussion however we can get it on the calendar.
And I agree with Laura. I'd rather that part be removed until we can have the discussion with the community first.
Knowing that it's going to cost us twice as much if we have that discussion. And decide to go with it. Just that's what, it's twice as much.
Yes, I hear you. And I believe that privacy is worth that. Yes, I do.
Sylvia?
Just if we approve it as is and decide not to go with it, we're also losing money. So it's a risk either way.
How are we losing money if we go with?
If we approve this contract and pay for the ALPR system, and then
We're not paying for the software upfront, are we?
It's part of the
Damien?
contract.
It's part of the contract, yeah. So I think, so there's three possible options, I think. One is just approving the contract, right? Possibly with some follow-up action. One is to take out the LPR component of it and approve that. I think a third might be if the concern is about duration of storage, that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure that I can find all that out by the 28th. We lose a couple of weeks, but maybe at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world either. And get more information about how much control we have over storage duration.
But what I'm hearing is it's not just a storage issue, it's a period issue. And people giving up privacy and the whole community giving up privacy is what I'm hearing. Am I?
But storage duration that Damien mentioned, that is the issue.
But I don't think from what I'm hearing from Laura and Kay is even if the storage is a month, the fact that they're taking a snapshot is not going to suffice in moving forward with any reader at all. Did I misread that?
well, I would feel much more comfortable with it if the storage duration was shorter, but I'd be happy to have you find that out, but I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not really an option. I think they like to have as part of the agreement that we retain it for a year. I thought that I knew that as fact until now, but now I'm doubting it, so I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we can't move forward on this. I will open it up to public comment, but I'm hearing that we can't move forward. So
I'm just not clear. I thought we had a couple options. We could vote to move forward with it as is, or we could vote to move forward without the ALPR right now, if we
Or I
wanted
thought
to.
I heard Damon said that he could check on the duration of storage if that's an option too. And then move it to the
but then we
28th.
would move it to the
To the
28th.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be the third option, I guess.
But, and my point on that is that if we could, is that still going to suffice or not? Because then it wouldn't make sense for him to do that work and us to move it if it's still not going to be okay. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I see. If the duration really was 30 days and we could guarantee that it was purged after that, I personally would feel more comfortable with
Okay.
it.
And that's what I was trying to
But,
get at. If you're
yeah.
never gonna move because it's taking a picture, period, end of story, then delaying it wouldn't. help.
Right, but
That's
I still think delaying it's not gonna help because I think they're gonna come back and tell us we can't do that, but
Well,
I'm not
then-
sure.
Right. Revving the hells in it. We're planning to bring some media items on the 28th. So
Yeah,
just something to keep in mind.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay. While you guys are pondering this, can I open up for public comment? Would that be okay with everyone? Okay, and we've lost our audience, so can we open up the Zoom public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. And Mayor Harvey, that'll end Zoom public comment.
Okay. So what are we going to do here?
Well, I'll make a motion and just see what happens. I'll make a motion that we approve the contract with the stipulation that we leave off the ALPR for now.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Since this is kind of crazy rather than a oral, I will ask for a roll call vote if you would be so kind.
Councilmember Rivers,
Aye.
Councilmember Lemus,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sparks,
Yes.
Mayor Harvey.
No. Okay, so, wow, that was painful, but we got through it as usual. You did a good job. So we can move on to city manager's report.
All right, so I will. The rain has delayed things, as you probably can guess, especially in the world of construction. And we have the Cotati Park refurbishment going on, and we do expect the shade structure and play equipment. It was expected in March and installed in April, so maybe early April, installed later in April, I'm not sure. And pathways also, weather permitting. And then, so we're expecting that by, assuming it doesn't rain the entire time, but sometime in April or maybe early May now, the park will be done except for the restroom. And then the restroom should come in July. So anyway, that's exciting. The La Plaza and West Sierra Road construction project, that's around the hub and then up West Sierra, that's all going to get started as soon as the rain allows us to get going. The 2023 street reconstruction job is delaying. That's the one that's out at Myrtle. That's going to lag a bit, but we do expect maybe late spring, early summer to get going on that one. But it's going to be behind in time from the downtown paving project. We're currently right now, we're currently bidding paving or painting, sorry, of City Hall, Civic Center, Cotati Room. So after we do the windows, then they're going to come in and repaint. Probably notice some of the trim needs some help. So it'll hopefully make everything, just finish it off and look nice. The housing element, that is one of the items that I alluded to earlier with a big agenda. So the housing element, the draft is going to Planning Commission on the 20th, and then is planning to come to council on the 28th. So that'll be a, significant, I'm sure a significant discussion. And finally, I'll just finish up on some rec stuff. So we have next week, Camp Cotati Spring Break Camp for families is going. They're open Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5 with extended care options if you're interested in that. They're doing crafts, games, and playing outside as long as it's not raining outside. And anyway, it's spring break, so a great way to keep your kids engaged if they're just bored around the house. Bunny Brunch will take place on Saturday, April 1st, and sold out for this year. We do have a wait list that's available in case there are cancellations, but we will not be taking signups at the door. We do, though, have bunnygrams. So if you're not able to get in the door, you always can deliver a bunnygram to someone that you love, and they bring a basket full of goodies, including stuffed eggs, candy treats, and more. And they're going to be delivered on April 7th. Also taking place on April 1st is the Farmsters sheep shearing soiree, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the ranch. And it's a great opportunity to watch and learn how sheep get sheared and to get a tour of the ranch. And then in that same day, it's going to be a busy day at the ranch. Sandy Loam's hosting their spring gardening family workshop where families can learn the basics of preparing garden beds, starting seed starts, transfers, weeding, composting, mulching, and more. And registration is required, so you can sign up on our rec portal. And then finally, we just have a bunch of other stuff coming up that I won't get into detail yet, but during spring, we have Spring Festival at the ranch, a community camp out also at the ranch, the community yard sale, and many more things. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Do you sign up for the sheep shearing on the on the Cotati website?
So The notes I have don't say, but I think we do, because we usually register for all of this stuff. So I think the answer is yes.
No? Okay. Well, thank you for that report. Then we will move on to council member reports. Okay, Ben?
I'll just mention one thing from the Sonoma Clean Power Board meeting this month. The board approved contracts with 3 contractors to develop pretty exciting projects at the geysers and which could eventually lead to more than doubling the generation happening at the geysers, which is super important to our power grid because it's baseline 24/7 generation as opposed to solar and wind that come and go. Yeah, it was a exciting discussion, especially because one of the contractors was Chevron.
Oh, interesting. Huh. That's interesting. Kay, do you have anything to?
I just wanted to, I'm not sure, was there any discussion on why I was not here last time?
No.
Okay, so I just want to share the reason I was not here at I guess it was the special meeting. I am a school teacher in Santa Rosa, and many of my students were intimate friends of the 3 involved in the Montgomery death of a student. And so they had a listening session. And so as a teacher in the district and, caring about the students who care about those kids, I felt it was important that I was there. So that's where I was on that Tuesday.
Okay, Laura?
Nothing to report this time around.
Okay, great. Well, I attended my first LAFCO meeting. That was very interesting. It had a breadth of things, fire department stuff, as well as some small inclusion of a property into a sewer district. So that was, it was interesting discussion. And the reason it needed to be included is that site is going to be looked at to build some permanent homeless housing out in the Guerneville area. So we were able to pass that. So that was good. I attended the North Bay Executive Committee meeting, and I just want to remind folks that on the 30th of March is the first in-person division meeting, and Assembly Member Lori Wilson will be attending, and the meeting is in Suisun City. I thought we had a well-attended Land Use 101. I thought that was really great, and hopefully everybody got what they needed out of that. Poor Ben, he's probably overindulged in planning, huh? Yeah. I had a CIRA orientation, which was very useful. A lot of stuff going on there. And I attended yesterday the SCTA RCPA meeting. And of note for everyone here, since it was brought up at our strategic planning, is that this month, the RFP for a new e-bike will be going out for new vendors. So we might not need to do anything. It will go out by the end of this, at the latest, the end of this month for new vendors. So I thought that would be of note to folks. And that's all I have. So next we move to public comment on non-action agenda items. And seeing no one in the public, unless you would like to speak. No? Okay, then we will open it up to Zoom attendees.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, thank you for that. Then the next item we have is closed session, and it is conference with real property negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. Property is 147 St. Joseph's Way. Cotati and city negotiator, city manager, negotiating party, Cotati Hotel LLC, under negotiation terms of payment of sale of property. So. That? Yes. So we will be adjourning to closed session. Thank you. No?
No, no
No
information.
information? Okay, so then I will call this meeting adjourned at 9:09. Thank you very much, everyone.